how would they apply, Catholic mindfulness or just coping with singleness when you pile upon that social isolation? I've got friends in New York City there, and they've told me, like, for the young adults living out there, I mean, it's rough. It's like this perfect storm. I mean, it's hard enough when you're just not around a lot of families. There's not a lot of marriage and kids running around. It's all these young professionals. And then everybody's locked up in all their studio apartments. And even when they're together wearing masks and 6 feet apart, like, how would you recommend for these, especially young adult singles who are already battling the challenges of singleness and uncertainty in the future, to deal with the stress of the present moment and being further isolated from one another? What are some tips that you could give for them to manage this and maintain their sanity in the midst of this singleness and isolation?
Yeah, great question. And so to break it down, like the cause, with imagining scenarios where there are problems that need to be solved is one of our fortes. We're really good at that. Our brains are made for that, anticipating where there could be a problem. And so if we're not careful and we don't learn how to get in control of that capacity, we could end up spending hours upon days just spinning our wheels, coming up with all these problems. And this happens a lot of times when we hit our head on the pillow and we're supposed to be going to sleep. And all of a sudden, that's when the eyes open up and the brain goes crazy, coming up with everything that went wrong from the day, everything that could go wrong tomorrow. This is what our brain is good at. So we have to develop a capacity to be in control of that particular faculty of the mind. Sometimes it's good to do problem solving, but we should be in control of it, not letting it run wild. So what happens as a single person, there's all sorts of opportunities to imagine worst case scenarios, bad case scenarios. And in that time by ourselves, we might be doing that in our mind instead of being in the present moment. And my heart goes out to single people still discerning their vocation, figuring out what they're supposed to be doing, or living in that single space, because there's such an opportunity to develop an incredibly deep intimacy with God. And once you get into the ebb and flow of normal life, if that's not your normal life and you're looking forward to religious life or marriage or family life or whatever, then life takes over. And all sorts of other responsibilities are going to get in the way. And then you're going to realize, looking back, I had so much time. I could have been doing prayer, novenas, consecrations, adoration, studying, learning, reading, all these different things. So in this present moment, what I remind single people especially to do constantly is to embrace that part of your life that God has willed you to be in right now. This is the chapter God has willed you to be reading and part of and writing right now. So what's available to you in this present moment? And there's lots that's available. It's through the presence of God. There's a simple mindfulness prayer that I start every day with. I start almost every hour with. I end the day with. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. Ever-present God, here with me now. Help me to be here with you. And this reminds us intellectually, brings to mind the ever-present reality of God, that in this moment, no matter what my fantasy mind can come up with that's not in this present moment, I am safe here in his embrace, in a relationship with him. And then I'm asking him to help me stay here in this present moment with him. And that's the absolute best way to reconnect with God in this moment and actually find peace no matter what is going on.
It's a neat way to look at it. So in a certain way, what anxiety is at the end of the day is a misuse of the gift of our imaginative faculties. And so God has given us this gift for our own survival because we need it and our creativity and everything. But we're taking that gift and allowing it to just get overrun with thoughts and fears. And it reminds me a bit of what St. Paul said in the letter to the Corinthians, where he's talking about singles. And he said, I wish you're all single, because like a single woman, he said, is anxious about the things of the Lord, whereas a single woman is anxious about how she might please her husband. And I think we're getting this backwards, where the single woman is anxious about her husband who hasn't shown up yet.
Right.
Where the heck is he? He's not showing up to daily mass. Instead of being anxious about the Lord, they're anxious about the guy who isn't even there. And then if the guy does show up in her life, she still won't be anxious about the things of the Lord. There'll still be this deep unrest because she was not in the present moment.
Exactly. Yeah. The only way to actually make a gift of self in the most fruitful way possible is having that self-ownership where one has first submitted themselves to the fatherhood of God, which is to be in his peace, in his presence. And once we have that self-ownership through complete submission to the Father, then we have the freedom to make a gift of ourselves, and that gift becomes the most fruitful. And a lot of people are struggling in their marriages because they haven't figured out how to do that yet, because they didn't use their time of singlehood to learn how to have that kind of intimacy with the Father. And now they're going to have to work it out amidst all of the other regular anxieties of married life. And then children come into the picture. And this is more and more complicated and more difficult the further you go if you haven't sort of locked in or at least gotten a grasp of what that's like when you had that time for yourself.
Yeah, no, I can imagine it adds so much more to the stress of a marriage when, in a sense, one or both spouses has to backpedal of levels of spiritual development that were never set into place, and now you're trying to build up the structure, and level 2 of that foundation, is mush. And so, I mean, marriage is tough enough, and so if people can, do the hard work of marriage prep 5 or 10 years before their marriage, of working on themselves, it's such a gift to their future spouse.